to another edition of Digital Dialogues. My name is Terry Johnson, adjunct professor with the University of St. Thomas, Center for Faith and Culture's Family Life Graduate and Certificate Program. I am joined today by two pillars of the Family Life Ministry community, Charlie Balsam and Winnie Honeywell. Charlie and Winnie have 50 plus years of combined experience in marriage and family ministry. They join me today for a brief segment on the topic of family of origin. Winnie and Charlie, welcome to Digital Dialogues.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Terry.
Winnie, our topic today is family of origin, a topic that those of us in marriage and family ministry are very familiar with. But for the uninitiated, could you briefly explain what it means?
Basically, it is that each of us are created related. In other words, each of us as human beings are born into a family. This includes Jesus because he was also fully human, and he was raised in infancy by Mary and Joseph. Families teach us and pass on values on how to function, how they do, how their family, our family. They teach us how to relate, not always consciously. A lot of this is unconscious. They're trying to do a good job, but that doesn't mean they are. So families are teaching us and passing on values, how to function, how to relate.
Charlie, where did this concept of family of origin come from?
Well, it's something we learned about in family ministry, and it's a topic that we addressed many times in different ways. The first place actually came out of a document that the Bishops' Conference in Washington wrote in 1988. Just back up a second, in 1981, St. John Paul published his exhortation that followed the Synod on the Family, the first Synod on the Family in 1980. In 81, he published Familiaris Consortio, which is Latin for On the Family. And in that document, as in all church documents, the sections are numbered. And in section 70, the Bishops' Committee that was studying the document noticed this particular statement: no plan for organized pastoral work at any level must ever fail to take into consideration the pastoral area of the family. Well, the Bishops' Committee, 1983 and 1984, studying that document and thinking to itself, maybe we don't need to write more programs. Maybe the Pope is talking about a different way to think about the challenge of marriage and family life. And so in 1988, they published the first edition of A Family Perspective in Church and Society. It was later revised in 1998. Well, the Family Perspective is not a program as much as a strategy for how to minister to and with families. It's a lens that you put on to view ministries and programs, taking into consideration, as St. John Paul urged, several aspects of marriage and family life. So one of its strategies was to understand the mission of the family and how families are systems of relationships. As Winnie said, we're created related. So the family of origin is one aspect that you take into consideration in sacramental preparation, faith formation, youth ministry, and in ministry training and formation, I think.
Charlie, can you give a concrete example of where we can apply a good understanding of family of origin in a ministry setting?
Sure, and Winnie kind of alluded to it. When we minister with engaged couples as they prepare for marriage, I know one thing that we do in some of the programs that I've been associated with is that we ask them to imagine walking down the aisle wearing backpacks, which is another metaphor, or pulling a roller bag, which is kind of a metaphor for the fact that they're carrying their family of origin identities, the dominant characteristics, the traditions, the attitudes and values about life and faith, as well as relationship skills and habits. They're carrying these kinds of things into Christian marriage. either as assets or as limitations, because these are things we learn before we know we're learning them. So for an example, common example would be, how did you learn about conflict or disagreements? How are they managed in your family? That might be an asset to your marriage, but it may not. So understanding this part of your background can be helpful to young couples early in their marriage, so that if they need a different or a better way to work through conflicts, they can find one together as partners. And this also plays into the notion that Christ called us to practice forgiveness. And so how your family practiced forgiveness, how your family solved conflicts is something that you take into consideration as you marry. And I think most good marriage preparation programs teach that. Real quick, another way would be in sacramental preparation with parents. You could invite parents to reflect on their own family of origin faith influences, and to see clearly that they are the family of origin influence on their children's faith. So those are two quick examples, I think, of how it can apply.
Okay. Winnie, in what other setting has use of a study of family of origin been especially helpful in a ministry setting?
Well, everyone that I have trained or taught this family of origin message to, whether it be religious educators, youth, clergy, youth ministers, clergy, they have found this information very important, especially in the diaconate, in the training for the diaconate. It's a class that both the deacons to be and their wives have to take, and to deal with what they're bringing into ministry before we get into what they can give in ministry.
Winnie, what are the core areas that are explored when we're looking at family of origin, and what does it reveal?
5 areas. There are 5 areas that roles, the role in the family, scripts, values, closeness, or what we call cohesion, and leadership. Those are all areas.
Could you briefly explain each one of those?
Okay. We use, most of these are personal examples, but also I think they teach the message. In roles, you can have the clown, you can have the peacemaker in your family, people that we know they react or respond in certain ways. One that I thought about was the breadwinner. My mother, who was a doctor, and this is 60 years ago, that she was, or no more, even more than that, when she learned to be a doctor. She was one of 3 women in a medical class at the college she went to. And, but that was her, she was the breadwinner, because my father was a doctor, but he gave all his care away. And he didn't take the responsibility for, for being that. So that affected us all. And I realized later that it affected me because I decided to stay home with our sons, having had 4 in 5 years. And I found a letter that I wrote to my mother asking if that was okay, that I was not going to be a professional now. So that's an example. The second is scripts, the script that you're supposed to live in this family. And I have the scripts from the Tars, my father's side, and the Delars on the other side. And those are 2 very different families. Now, my husband, just an example, whereas my grandfather paid for anyone that wanted to go to college, because even though he never had, But my husband, in his family, he was the first to ever go to college. And the family changed their values so much that his parents, some of his aunts and uncles and all, moved to California from Nebraska just so he could get scholarships. It changed, that's, it's where they changed their values and changed the script. Another one is values, religious or not, Catholic or not. I remember, when one of our sons said he didn't want to go to mass that day, budding teenager. We said, well, the Honeywells do it. You don't have to like to be there, but when we go to mass, we go together. So that's the rule. That's our value. Another one is cohesion and closeness. One side of the family, the almost completely non-Catholic side of my family, I had 23 cousins. On the Catholic side, I had no cousins because my mother's two brothers were priests and her sister never married. So all of the closeness really was about at reunions. We had lots of reunions, lots of cousins. And yet on the other side, I never knew my grandfather because he died before I was born. But my grandmother wouldn't even come to the wedding of my father and mother because she was marrying a non-Catholic. And finally, leadership. Leadership in the family goes from authoritarian leadership to permissive, very permissive leadership. So, and then there's a lot in between. And I think there's with our own family, we were pretty much in the middle. When our son wanted something that seemed a little bit too much his choice, we sat down and I explained what might happen if he went to this party where he didn't know if the parents would be there. And I said, I have the same goal you do, Douglas. I want you to grow up and get out of here. So let's talk about what might happen there and whether you can handle it yet. Because I want you out of here too. And after we talked about it, he looked at me and he said, I don't think I'm quite ready. So that was a different kind of leadership than somebody saying, you absolutely cannot go. Or, of course, doesn't matter.
Charlie, it seems to me that regardless of a person's area of ministry, it's essential for anyone who interacts with people to have a good understanding of family of origin as far as how that formed them. What impact do you see this having if ministry leaders from a wide number of disciplines learned and applied these concepts in their own areas of ministry?
Well, that's a good question. Two things come to mind, and again, Winnie, kind of piggybacking on some things that Winnie mentioned, but the first one would be I would call life skills. How did my family equip me to serve in ministry? Whether the skills are with people or with information or with organizational skills or skills with things. Am I a take charge kind of guy? Do I like to be in the background? Some of those kinds of questions, how I was shaped, might be useful. Can I support and empower others in ministry, or is it all about me? So how do I relate? How do I carry on work? How do I get things done and interact with people? So life skills would be one thing that would be important to think about. The ones I'm currently using, as well as maybe I need to back off of something and make room and then try something new. So, and the second one, and most important, I think, is central to our conversation right now, is faith. What did I learn about God and prayer and Jesus and service and worship, Catholicism? What things came together that led me into ministry? You know, that called me. How did I get here? Why am I in this path in my life? So similar kind of to the engaged example, are these some of these family of origin traits assets or limitations in how I lead or how I serve? How can I grow in humility and prayer to better teach and train and lead as Jesus did? So the impact, I think, the potential impact is for more effective ministry, for more effective ministers, especially in how we approach volunteers, couples and parents and families.
That is so true, because it's one of those things that you don't know how much things impact you and how they're going to impact your ability to minister until you do your own self-reflection and realize some of those things that formed you will affect, you know, how you engage others and how you treat your ministry. So very good point. Charlie, why does any of this matter in the end?
Well, I guess kind of thinking of all the things Winnie has shared and the points I've been trying to make, I think it's important because salvation came to us in a family which had its own ancestry and its culture and its way of being family. And our mission as church is to evangelize, and in this case, to equip the students and who will be studying this curriculum to minister to and with couples and parents and families and their peers to become advocates with their peers. So how they understand what has brought them to this place would be very useful. Could be very humbling. It also could be very empowering. And then the reason I think it's important is because marriage and family is the other vocation in service to communion, as the Catechism calls it. And it has to fulfill its Christian calling. So we want to help people find God in their family stories and to celebrate that, to seek healing if any of that surfaces any hurts, and how to move past that, but especially to center their lives on Christ and his faith community.
Excellent. Winnie, I'd like to go back and follow up on something that you had mentioned a little bit earlier. When the family of origin issues are being discussed with, say, the candidates for the diaconate, what are some tools that are utilized for these deacon candidates and their wives to do a good exploration of their family of origin?
Well, primarily, and this is required, at least it was when I was teaching in the diaconate, they need to do a genogram. That's a little different from genealogy. A genogram is like a family tree. It shows you the families you came from. Like in mine, if you held up my genogram with the family with the 23 cousins, and over here, the other side, empty of cousins and empty of marriages other than my mother, then you would say, and sometimes I don't put any names or anything on there, and I ask the class, which is the Catholic family? And most all the time they guess wrong. And so what you do, and I've heard deacons and their wives say this is, I didn't want to do this, but it's been very, very valuable to me to see how complex my history is, where my values came from, why I got divorced, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it kind of helps us kind of reconnect to the fact that we are not in a vacuum. We're not created, and it kind of, our Lord does miraculous things, right? But he doesn't like take us from one existence to bloop, plops us into another, into our lives, and that's it. That I really love the way that you expressed or early on how we're created related. We're created to be a part of a family, and so that has an impact. Winnie, will this topic of family of origin be addressed in the new Family Life Graduate and Certificate Program?
If they listened to the three of us, yes. And there are other people also on the team that think this is important. And one of the things that I've said to them is, to the leaders of this, is the earlier the better. The earlier, it doesn't mean it all has to be finished early, but we should know about this family of origin and how important it is, from day one. And so, yeah, I know it will come up toward the end in the 3 classes that, or courses that are pastoral. But I think also it should be mentioned at, even before that.
Excellent. Charlie, any final thoughts?
Well, I think one of the theology classes on the dignity of the human person, that'd be a great place to talk about being created related, because it goes back to why God put us here in the first place and the dignity that we have as God's children and as God's creatures. So, no, I think marriage and family is the most important pastoral concern of the church, because the domestic church is foundational to the mission of Christ. So I'm thrilled that the university and the Center for Faith and Culture is going to offer this specialization, this graduate specialization, and that Winnie and I were able to make this contribution to hopefully help put some direction, in how these students are going to be formed.
And well, thank you very much. That's going to wrap up this edition of Digital Dialogues. I'd like to invite you to check out the Center for Faith and Culture's Year of the Family series. And if you have a special place in your heart for serving the domestic church, please consider enrolling in the Family Life Ministry Graduate and Certificate Program offered through the University of St. Thomas Center for Faith and Culture. For Digital Dialogues, I'm Terry Johnson. Take good care, everyone, and God bless you.